We can, if we want, tell SQL, or at least suggest to SQL, how we want SQL to perform a query. And this is done through the use of query hints. Now, before we go anywhere with query hints, I want to highlight that bottom bullet point right away. Typically, query hints should be avoided. There's an old saying in programming, don't outsmart the compiler. And what that really goes back to is developers who would do things in their code to trick the compiler to do something that they thought was going to be faster. And more often than not, what would happen is one of three things. Either A, the compiler would have done it anyway. B, you've now told the compiler to do something that's actually slower. Or C, while you might have gotten a little bit of a performance boost, the code that you wrote was so convoluted that trying to go back and support it is really going to cost you more money in the long run. Same exact thing holds true with SQL. More often than not, SQL's going to do the exact right thing. And in fact, if you find that SQL's not doing the right thing, your first step should be to figure out why it's doing what it's doing, rather than configuring SQL to behave differently. That being said, query hints will give you some level of control over how SQL is going to execute a query. So if you want to tell SQL what index to use, how to optimize, what locks to use, you can do all of that through query hints. For example, you can use different locking hints to indicate how you want your data to be locked. So you can tell SQL to lock data, force it to do it at the row level, force it to do it at the page level, or force it to do it at the table level. Now, the problem with forcing it to do it at one level or another is that quite frequently you're going to wind up optimizing the query in a way that is, well, actually suboptimal. So do be very careful about using these. The exact same thing holds true with index and parameter hints. Now, with force scan and force seek, I can specifically tell it to do a scan or to do a seek on the table, or I can also tell it how I want it to optimize as far as parameters go. Now, one of the most common for parameters is optimize for unknown, and this one I do want to highlight because there can be quite a bit of occasion where optimize for unknown is exactly what you want to use. One of the things that we're going to be talking about in another lesson is how to create stored procedures. And one of the goals of stored procedures is to take different parameters, different values, different search criteria. Well, one of the things that can happen is that we may need different execution plans depending on the parameter value that's passed in. This is where optimize for unknown comes into play. Basically what it does is it tells SQL, hey, be a little bit more generic. When you're creating this query plan, don't optimize for the specific value that's passed in.